Hi, my name's Tony Hanson. I run Environmental Solutions International. Thank you for having a look at this YouTube video of a presentation that I did at Water Resources East in London a couple of weeks ago, where there was a meeting of industry representatives from energy, food production and a number of other areas, together with the Environment Agency Water Resource East, who organised the event, and Waterwise to look at abstraction licenses and the availability of water going forward and the likely demand that are going to come from industry over the next 20 years. My presentation provided a little bit of background on Environmental Solutions International and the sort of work that we have been doing and continue to do, and a little bit of background on my history. If you'd like to have a detailed look at this slide, you can just pause the video for a moment. With all of our clients, we are working towards net zero and beyond. With the Gulf leisure and estates sector that we work primarily with, there are significant opportunities to achieve well beyond net zero, and potentially there is the opportunity also to create a carbon offset program with your own suppliers and engage with your stakeholders on that basis. So, natural capital value. And the benefits that Gulf provide. A couple of years ago I did a study in conjunction with BIGGA to try and understand the unmanaged areas of golf courses, the naturalised habitat that is managed by the golf industry in England. We got to a figure of something in the order of 670 square kilometres, which is almost the size of Exmoor National Park, to put it into some sort of perspective. But the idea of natural capital value is a relatively simple one. It tries to quantify the benefits that the natural biodiversity and habitat creates for the wider community in terms of improving air quality and water quality, reducing air temperatures, and the potential for flood relief, which, given the last couple of months and the heavy rainfall, and certainly the last couple of years where we seem to have had much heavier rainfall events over the winter period, is going to become increasingly important. So I can hear you say, what's the problem with water? Well, in terms of building a resilience plan, it's not necessarily just drought resilience, but it's also flood resilience, something that we have seen again through this winter. But we can't get away from the fact that the last 3 years we have had low rainfall totals. We had in 2019, through the tail end of the year, significant rainfall in the East Midlands particularly, but across through Wales as well. So we did get flooding events just because of the sheer volume and the intensity of the rainfall events that we were getting. During the summer periods, it appears to be the case that we are getting less rainfall, we're getting longer, drier periods. So although it might be that you could argue that it averages out, because of the distribution of the rainfall through the year and the intensity of the events that happen when we do get rainfall, the intensity of the storm fronts that seem to be moving through, it's leading to dry summers and flooding winters, partly compounded by the additional building that we've allowed over the last 20, 30, 40 years. Certainly areas of floodplain are now being built on, and I know there are SUD schemes trying to find in the built environment ways of delaying the spike, the peak of runoff, through natural landscaping, permeable pavements and all sorts of other projects that have been put together. But we can't get away from the fact that actually rainfall is becoming changeable now in terms of its volume, its quantity and its time period. The image on the right hand side of this slide picks up population growth and expected population growth up to 2045. And if you overlay the areas of water stress with the increases in population in the East Midlands coming down south through North London into Kent and even through into the southwest, we are increasing our populations, increasing water demand and increasing that competition for demand for water in areas where there is already water stress. So over the last couple of years we've put together a water report which is freely available should you wish to read it. It identifies the location of golf clubs across England And what we found in terms of the distribution is that we do have the majority of golf clubs clearly in areas of higher population. 20% located in the Thames region, but you can identify your own region from this slide and see how you fit. But generally speaking, golf clubs are going to follow populations. You're not going to have a golf course out in the middle of nowhere because it makes it very much more difficult for you financially for a business to be sustainable. So we already are in a situation where golf courses are in competition for water supplies, and we also know that an awful lot of golf clubs are still using potable mains water for their irrigation. Now in 2019, BIGGA commissioned a survey. The responses are interesting. We've got a much better understanding from their survey as to the sources of water primarily. And if you look at this particular slide, it suggests that mainline municipal water, so potable mains water used for irrigation, makes up something less than 50%. Interestingly enough, we have information from the water companies that we've picked up over the last 2 or 3 years, which indicate that that figure is significantly higher, and that's on metered supply. So I would suggest it is certainly more accurate than the information that's provided by the survey from BIGGA, and that would suggest that we've got 66% of clubs that are actually using mains water for irrigation, which is something that is going to have to change over the next few years. Open water supplies as well, nearly 20%. I don't think the national figure will be quite as high as that. Boreholes and abstraction from boreholes, again, a significant number. If you've got an existing borehole, that's fine. If you're using mains and don't have a borehole at the moment, because of the discussions that are going on between the Environment Agency and DEFRA looking at the abstractable volumes that are available in certain areas, it's unlikely that you're going to get a borehole. Another interesting fact that came up from the information provided by the BIGGA survey is the age distribution of irrigation systems across the country. If we look at this, we have the greatest number seem to be in the 1995 era or vintage, but more interestingly, if you look at anything pre-2000, so more than 20 years old, it is the vast majority of irrigation systems. Now we're all aware of the fact that an irrigation system, if you're going to install it, is going to probably cost somewhere in the region of between £350,000 and £500,000. So it is a very significant investment for any club. But in terms of improved efficiency of water use, it is going to be essential moving forward as we go into potentially drier times. Now, I briefly referred to the water report that ESI conducted, which has been released or was released in January. It was a follow-up to reports that we started doing in 2018, where we were looking at the availability of water. And in 2018, we identified that around 66% of clubs were using potable mains water. And at that point, the discussions were very much around moving from potable mains water for irrigation to abstraction, either borehole or surface water. The conversations moved on the last few years, and the predicted growth in population have resulted in a change in that attitude. We're now in a situation where it is entirely likely that abstraction volumes are not going to be sufficient to provide the leisure industry with its irrigation water, and that the onus is going to be much more strongly on providing your own resilience, having some form of reservoir on site that you can actually tap into. And the latest report that we put together has highlighted and cross-referenced golf facility locations against areas of greatest water stress in terms of the Environment Agency catchments. The slide in front of you now shows golf facilities with water availability at Q30 flow rates. Now, a Q30 flow rate is a flow rate which is exceeded for 70% of the time of recorded flows. So it's a quite normal spring, water flow, certainly on surface water. And when we cross-referenced those locations with limited or no water available, it came up with 238 Gulf locations that will fall within those catchment areas. So limited or no water availability. If there should be a temporary use ban, banning the use of potable mains, if we're right with 66% of those clubs actually using mains water for their irrigation, it might well put them in a situation where they would have no water available for irrigation. On the right hand side you can see Q95, so this is a drought condition. So this is flow rates that would indicate that we were into a severe drought, and at those sort of levels we've actually got 675 Gulf facilities with limited or no water available. So you can see here that we're not in a position where we can just switch to a borehole. We certainly couldn't do that very quickly if there was a drought order put in place or a hands-off notice provided by the Environment Agency. The Gulf industry couldn't react quickly enough, so this is an urgent problem we need to address now. For some clubs it might even be too late now. It depends on the summer that we have this year. But there are no alternatives. We have to look at building in a water resilience plan, and that's twofold. It might well be that we're looking at flood resilience and using some of that water, so when you've got land drainage and your 4-inch pipe, you see lots and lots of images on and video clips on Twitter showing 4-inch pipes and land drainage systems working, where basically golf clubs are just shoveling the water off their site and further downstream. Well, I think we're in a situation where we need to hang on to that and treat water as a precious resource and actually find some way of storing it for when we might need it in the summer. We're also talking to the Environment Agency about soft flood relief schemes, so there might even be some funding to help create naturalised ponds, swales, and even finding some way of pumping to a reservoir if you already have one. So all of those discussions are being driven at the moment by ESI to see whether we can actually find some way of engaging and working much more closely with the Gulf industry and landowners to find some solution to flooding and potentially to supply of water in drought. So what have ESI been doing to try and get the information out there about the coming crisis that we may face when it comes to water resource and water resilience? Well, we've been running seminars, we've been running workshops, we've been working with various partners, we've been working with the Environment Agency and water companies and Waterwise and irrigation companies. So we're trying to create that understanding. We have the identified locations that are going to be at greatest risk of losing their water, which, if you wish to get in touch with us, we can let you know whether your site is actually in an area of water stress, whether it's going to have water available, and whether we should be looking at some alternative form of water, either storage in a formal reservoir or some other more naturalised water storage capacity. And we're going to continue to do that. We're going to do less seminars on the road at venues. We're going to do much more in the way of webinars using Skype, so that it saves everyone having to travel the distance, and we're going to put those on onto the YouTube site as well, so that you can catch up. If you've missed a seminar, then at least you'll be able to get the information as well. So what do we know? Well, we know the good are very good. I've seen some excellent examples of water resource and resilience plans being put into place, building in drought resilience and also flood resilience. We need to get as much data as we can from the industry. We need to understand the sources and supply of water that we're using. We've got estimates, as I say, from the water companies. I would tend to believe that they're probably pretty accurate in terms of the information they're provided. But the replies that we had, I think BIGGA had somewhere between 150 and 200 replies to their irrigation data survey. And that's against nearly 2,000 golf clubs in England. So we need to know more. Environmental certification, which is one of the ways that we get that data through Gulf Environment Organisation. Currently we've got, I think it's 38 clubs that have actually gone geo-certified. which is the point at which they're providing detailed information on their resource use across the board, but including water. But we do need to know more, and I think from the Environment Agency's and DEFRA's point of view, certainly that's the feeling that they have. They need to know more about the sources and volumes of water that we're using, and that we are using that water as efficiently as possible. So if you'd like to know any more about water use, water resilience, flood and drought, then please let me know. You can contact me on my mobile, which is 07786 435 010. And thanks for listening.